Can you imagine pulling into a parking space for a quick grocery run, only to find yourself face to face with two strangers who've decided you don't belong there? And what begins as harsh words quickly escalates into physical assault, captured on security cameras, until one brave store employee and an off-duty cop turn the tables in a shocking twist that proves sometimes as a black person in America justice comes when you least expect it. If you love interesting stories like this that expose the truth, please give this video a thumbs up and tell us in the comments section where in the world you are watching this video, and also do well to smash that subscribe button. What started as a simple trip to the store turned into a battle she never saw coming. Keisha Washington glanced at her car's clock. 6:45 p.m. Another exhausting day at Summit Creative Agency had drained every ounce of energy from her body. The advertising campaign had kept her glued to her computer screen for 12 straight hours, and her neck ached from the stress. All she wanted was to grab some groceries and collapse on her couch before the night got too late. As she drove into the Riverside Plaza parking lot, she noticed it was moderately busy. The store's neon sign buzzed and flickered, casting an eerie glow across the scattered shopping carts left behind by rushed customers. Keisha rolled her shoulders, trying to release the tension. Then she spotted it. The perfect parking space, just steps from the entrance. "Finally," she whispered, pulling in smoothly. She turned off the engine and reached for her purse, already mentally going through her shopping list. Bread, milk, vegetables, and maybe a bottle of wine to end this horrible day. But as she opened her door, movement caught her eye. A silver pickup truck had stopped directly behind her, headlights blazing like angry eyes. Inside, she could see two figures. The man behind the wheel gripped it so tightly his knuckles had turned white. The woman beside him was already reaching for her door handle, her face twisted with rage. Before Keisha could even process what was happening, the woman exploded out of the truck. "Are you kidding me right now?" she screamed, slamming her door so hard the whole vehicle shook. The woman looked to be in her 50s, with short blonde hair that bounced as she marched toward Keisha like a soldier going to war. "We were waiting for that spot." Keisha blinked, completely caught off guard. "Waiting? I didn't see you there." She kept her voice calm, hoping to defuse whatever this was before it got worse. "I'm happy to move if you were here first." But her reasonable response only seemed to make things worse. The man stepped out too, tall, broad, and radiating anger like heat from a fire. His cold stare locked onto Keisha like she had personally insulted his entire family. "Of course you didn't see us," he muttered, his voice dripping with poison. Something in his tone made Keisha's stomach drop. This wasn't just about parking. The woman, who Keisha would later learn was named Linda, moved closer, her eyes blazing. "You people always think you can do whatever you want." The words hit Keisha like a physical blow. "You people." Her grip tightened on her car door as the ugly truth became crystal clear. This wasn't about a parking space. This was about her. "Look," Keisha said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I didn't see you. Like I said, I can move." "That's not the point," Linda snapped, putting her hands on her hips like she was about to lecture a child. The man, Brad, took a slow, threatening step closer. His presence loomed over her like a dark cloud. "You're not sorry," he said, his voice low and menacing. "People like you never are. People like you." There it was again. Keisha's heart started racing. Her mind spun as she debated whether to get back in her car and leave or stand her ground. But why should she run? She hadn't done anything wrong. It was just a parking spot. But the way they were looking at her, Brad's clenched jaw, Linda's narrowed eyes full of hate, told her this was about so much more than parking. She had no idea how far they were willing to take this. The weight of their stares pressed down on her, but Keisha refused to be intimidated. She had done absolutely nothing wrong. "Look," she said, taking a deep breath. "I don't want any trouble. If this space means that much to you, I'll move my car. She reached for her door handle, but Linda threw up her hand like a traffic cop. Oh no, no and no. You're not getting off that easy, she spat. You think you can just take whatever you want and then pretend to be the bigger person? Keisha frowned. Excuse me? You heard me, Linda said, stepping even closer, her voice rising to a shriek. You people always play the victim. Keisha's jaw tightened. There it was again. That coded language, that venom in Linda's voice. She had dealt with people like this before. Passive-aggressive comments at work. Microaggressions disguised as jokes. Condescending tones that implied she didn't belong. But this was different. This was raw, unfiltered hatred. I'm not playing anything, Keisha said slowly, forcing herself to stay composed. I parked in an open space. That's all. That's when Brad, who had been silently fuming, suddenly lunged forward and shoved a nearby shopping cart. The metal screeched against the pavement as it rolled into a curb with a loud crash. You don't belong here, he muttered, just loud enough for her to hear. Keisha's heart pounded in her chest. Did he just say that? The air between them felt electric, charged with unspoken threats. Linda smirked, crossing her arms and watching her husband with satisfaction. Keisha felt heat creeping up her neck. She was outnumbered. The parking lot wasn't empty, but it wasn't packed either. People walked past, some glancing their way, but no one stopped. Maybe they thought it was just a typical argument. Maybe they didn't want to get involved. Keisha swallowed hard and forced herself to stand tall. You need to back up, she said, her voice firm now. Brad let out a cold laugh, tilting his head like he found her defiance amusing. Or what? He challenged. Keisha clenched her fists. She wasn't afraid to stand up for herself, but she also wasn't reckless. She knew men like Brad, the kind who thought they could push people around without consequences. Linda, clearly emboldened by her husband's aggression, sneered. You're lucky we don't make you move. Make me. Keisha stiffened. Something shifted in the air. This time, a few bystanders actually stopped, their eyes darting between the three of them. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Keisha exhaled slowly. She needed to get out of this situation before it exploded. But she had no idea that Brad wasn't done yet. The confrontation was escalating fast, and Keisha could feel danger closing in like storm clouds. Brad squared his shoulders, stepping even closer until she could smell his anger. You think you can just walk away? He taunted, his voice low but sharp as a blade. You're not going anywhere. Keisha's pulse quickened. She instinctively looked around, searching for someone, anyone, who might help. A few people lingered nearby, their eyes darting toward the confrontation, but no one made a move. She had seen this before. People didn't want to get involved. They'd rather pretend they hadn't seen anything at all. Linda let out a bitter laugh. Look at her, she scoffed, acting all high and mighty, like we don't know exactly what kind of person she is. I'm not interested in whatever this is, Keisha said, keeping her voice level despite the fear creeping into her chest. I've already said I'll move if you. That's when Brad grabbed her arm. It happened so fast that Keisha barely had time to react. His grip was tight, his fingers digging into her skin like he had every right to put his hands on her. A sharp gasp escaped her lips as she jerked back, yanking her arm free. Don't touch me. Her voice was louder now, firm enough to carry across the parking lot. A few heads turned. The air around them seemed to crackle with silent anticipation. But Brad didn't look the least bit concerned. If anything, he looked proud of himself. Linda, emboldened by his aggression, shook her head in mock disappointment. Oh, so now you're the victim, she sneered. This is exactly what I was talking about. Always playing the poor, helpless. Don't touch her. The voice didn't belong to Keisha. She turned her head, and for the first time, someone had stepped in. It was a young store employee, probably in his early 20s, wearing a Riverside Plaza apron. His name tag read Carlos. He stood a few feet away, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Linda rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh, great, another one. What? You're gonna come to her rescue now?" Carlos didn't flinch. "I saw what just happened, and so did the cameras." Keisha's breath caught. Cameras. She had forgotten about them. Linda's smirk faltered, but Brad wasn't ready to back down. His jaw clenched, nostrils flaring as he glared at Carlos. "Mind your business, kid." Carlos took a step forward. "Nah, this is my business. And if you put your hands on her again, I'm calling the cops." For the first time since this nightmare started, uncertainty flickered across Brad's face. The power dynamic had shifted. The Millers weren't in control anymore. But Keisha had no idea that someone else was already watching. Another voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Is there a problem here?" Everyone turned to see a tall, broad-shouldered man in jeans and a gray t-shirt walking toward them. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were sharp, taking in every detail of the situation. As he approached, he held up a badge. "Off-duty police officer." Brad's entire attitude changed in an instant. His shoulders stiffened, his expression flickering from aggression to something else entirely. Fear. Linda forced a nervous laugh, her tone suddenly sweet as honey. "Oh, officer. No, there's no problem at all. Just a little misunderstanding." Keisha could have screamed at the way she switched up, playing innocent now that authority had arrived. The officer looked at Keisha. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Keisha swallowed and nodded slowly. "I just came here to get groceries." Carlos jumped in. He put his hands on her. "I saw it." The officer's expression darkened as he turned back to Brad. "Is that true?" Brad's jaw twitched. "It's not like that. It's exactly like that," Carlos shot back. Linda scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Oh, please, she's just trying to make this something it's not." The officer ignored her completely. "Sir, I'm going to need you to stay right here while I make a call." Brad's face went pale. Keisha could almost see the realization dawning on him. This wasn't going to be something he could just brush off. Linda grabbed his arm. "We don't have to stand here and take this. Let's just go." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Leaving the scene after putting your hands on someone? Not a smart move." Brad didn't respond. His hands twitched at his sides, but he didn't move. The tension was suffocating. No one spoke. No one moved. And then, from somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of sirens broke through the silence. Brad swallowed hard. It was too late. The wail of sirens grew louder, cutting through the thick silence like a knife. Brad shifted his weight nervously, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might shatter. Linda went stiff, her eyes darting between her husband and the approaching officer. "You actually called them?" she hissed under her breath. The officer kept his eyes on Brad. "Go ahead and stay right here," he said calmly. "I'd hate for this to turn into something worse than it already is." For the first time since this nightmare began, Keisha felt like she could breathe again. But she knew how quickly things could change. "This is ridiculous," Brad muttered. "All this over a damn parking spot." Carlos scoffed. "Yeah, sure. That's all it was." Brad shot him a glare, but Carlos didn't flinch. The young man stood his ground, arms crossed, eyes steady. A police cruiser pulled into the lot, its blue and red lights painting the evening sky in flashing colors. Two officers stepped out. One male, one female, their trained eyes sweeping over the scene in seconds. The off-duty officer gestured toward Brad and Linda. "I witnessed part of the altercation. The store employee here saw the rest. There are also security cameras." The female officer turned to Keisha. "Ma'am, would you like to press charges?" The question hit her like a weight in the chest. She hadn't even thought about that possibility. She had been so focused on just surviving the situation that pressing charges hadn't crossed her mind. Brad scoffed. "Oh, come on. I barely touched her." Carlos's expression darkened. "You grabbed her." The male officer frowned. "That's assault." Linda let out a humorless laugh. "You've got to be joking." "Do I look like I'm joking?" the officer shot back. Keisha took a deep breath. She could feel everyone's eyes on her, waiting for her answer. She looked at Brad, who was avoiding her gaze now. At Linda, still fuming but suddenly much less bold. Then she glanced at Carlos, the stranger who had stepped in without hesitation, and at the off-duty officer who had made sure she wouldn't face this alone. Keisha straightened her spine. "Yes." Linda's mouth dropped open. "You can't be serious." The female officer nodded. "All right, sir. Turn around." Brad barely had time to react before he was being guided toward the police car. He tensed as if he might resist, but the male officer gave him a look that made him think twice. Linda, suddenly panicked, grabbed at the officer's arm. "Wait! No! This isn't. He's not." "Ma'am, step back," the officer warned. "Unless you want to go with him." Linda froze, her face turning red. She looked at Brad, then back at Keisha. "You're going to regret this," she spat. Keisha didn't respond. She just watched as Brad was cuffed and placed in the back of the cruiser. Carlos let out a low whistle. "Karma, man." Keisha finally exhaled, letting go of the breath she'd been holding for what felt like hours. But she knew this moment would stick with her far longer than any parking lot ever could. The flashing red and blue lights painted the pavement in streaks of color as Keisha stood watching Brad sit stiffly in the back of the police cruiser. Linda lingered nearby, her arms crossed tightly, lips pressed into a thin, angry line. Keisha could still hear Linda's parting words echoing in her mind. "You're going to regret this." Regret? She wasn't the one who had lost control. She wasn't the one who had put her hands on a complete stranger over a parking spot. She turned toward Carlos, who was still standing nearby. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady now. Carlos shrugged. It was the right thing to do. The female officer approached with a small notepad. "We have enough to proceed with charges, but we'll need a statement from you. You'll likely be contacted for further details if this goes to court." Keisha nodded. "I understand." The officer jotted something down. "If you change your mind about pressing charges, let us know. But given the security footage and witness testimony, it's pretty cut and dry." Keisha let that sink in. For years, she had dealt with moments like these in silence. Passing encounters, dismissive attitudes. The sharp sting of coded words meant to remind her that she was unwelcome in spaces where she had every right to be. But this time, she hadn't been alone. She glanced at Carlos again, then at the off-duty officer who had kept his distance but made sure the situation didn't spiral out of control. The presence of witnesses, accountability, and evidence had changed everything. Linda, still standing near the squad car, suddenly let out a loud sigh. "This is ridiculous. We're good people. We don't deserve this." Keisha tilted her head slightly. "Good people? Good people don't put their hands on strangers. Good people don't hurl insults when things don't go their way. Good people don't have to constantly remind the world that they're good." But she didn't say any of that. She just gave Linda one last look before turning toward the store entrance. Carlos walked beside her. "You sure you still feel like shopping after all that?" he asked with a half-smile. Keisha let out a short laugh. "Honestly, I came here for a bottle of wine. I think I've earned it." Carlos chuckled. "Fair enough." As she walked into the store, the automatic door sliding open in front of her, Keisha allowed herself to breathe deeply. This moment wouldn't define her, but it had reminded her of something important. Some people never expect to face consequences for their actions, but sooner or later, they always do. And that was enough. What would you have done in Keisha's situation? Sometimes standing your ground is the only way to make change happen.